by mountains walking. Don't be fooled by mountains walking. And the inspiration for this comes from one of Dogen's writings called the San Sui Kyo. San is mountains, Sui is water, and Kyo is sutra. San Sui Kyo. And the main message, or I should say one main message here, is that insentient beings can preach the Dharma. And I'm just here flapping my lips, but if we check out the insentient, the walls, the floor, the grasses, they're also preaching the Dharma. In fact, they're probably much better at it than us adults. Children also are much better at preaching the Dharma because they don't know what it is. As soon as you know what it is, you're off base. And so you're making do with second class when I'm teaching the Dharma. We can hear the Dharma by listening to sound, just whatever sounds might be there. There's a story of a monk who was enlightened while he was sweeping the temple grounds, a pebble hit a bamboo pole, and when the pebble hit the bamboo pole, he was woken up. He had an awakening. There's a temple in Japan that my calligraphy teacher and I went to maybe 10 years ago now, where I can't remember the name of it, but it has something to do with the sound of the crickets, because the abbot there was enlightened by the sound of the crickets. And I remember when I was in Haiti, very mountainous country, it was so hot, first of all. I wasn't used to the heat. And I would take, my wife would go to work, and then I'd have all this big swatch of time to be with at that time, he must have been about 2 or 3 years old son. And I didn't know the language, so I just very in a vulnerable position. But we would go down to this one spot on the ocean, because it's right, everything's on the ocean there. Right? You just go down to this one spot, and it was really wonderful to hear the sound that was made when the waves came in to the shore. And then as they receded, all of these, I was used to, when I was growing up, I was used to an ocean in Maryland and Delaware. And those beaches were all sand. There was no rocks at all. And it was surprising for me to go to this beach where it was all rock, little rocks. There were smoothed over rocks, probably from thousands of years of the movement of the water back and forth, or maybe something else. And when the water would recede there, the rocks made this clicking sound. The pebbles made this clicking sound. And I can't, of course, replicate it here, but I can hear it in my mind. I told this to my wife while she was translating to a Haitian. And the Haitian says, there's a phrase for that. When somebody says, "I'm listening to the rocks click," it means that they're wasting time. Here in the Midwest, there's not a lot of mountains, right? And when I first listened to this sutra, the Mountains and Water Sutra, the immediate, because because I've been trained in science to a certain degree, not a lot, but the immediate image that came to my mind when I heard that mountains walk in the sutra is plate tectonics. And of course, Dogen didn't know anything about plate tectonics in that time. No way. We didn't know that that's what these mountains were doing. And so here we are in the Midwest, and there's no mountains, but we're deeply interconnected with the mountains. If we get a broader sense, here in the Midwest, we're deeply interconnected with the mountains. If you think about on the East Coast, you have the Appalachian Mountains, like coming up out of the ground, and they're some 480 million years old. They're older than the Rocky Mountains. The Rocky Mountains are a little bit younger. And you have these two mountains, like these two mountain ranges coming up on the coasts of the United States. And the image came to my mind of what if there was a cord between those two mountains, and those mountains were playing a kind of tug of war with the land. Right? So if we think in terms of the earth moving, and the Appalachians are moving this way, the Rockies are moving up this way, what's happening in between? It's like it's flattening it out. Everything's getting flattened out. Now, whether this is science-based or not, I'm not really concerned. Probably not. Scientists might say, oh, yeah, that's not exactly how the Midwest formed. But anyways.
You know we're going to look it up now, right?
Now you can look it up, yeah. But it just makes me wonder, like, you have this plain region, and on either side you've got mountains. And there must be some connection there. And that's kind of a metaphor also for each of us. We often think we are independent of what's happening around us. All right, so the Midwest is independent from the East Coast or the West Coast in some ways. That's how we kind of think. Regionally. What's that?
Geographically.
Geographically, yeah. Geographically. And sometimes we get caught in thinking that these regions are separate and different, and they are. They are separate and different. But the teachings of the Buddha are that everything is because everything else is. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you. That's really the reality of it. I would not be sitting here talking if it wasn't for you. Each one of you. Each one of you. Don't think, oh, well, I'm the exception. That's what we want to do. We want to say, I'm the exception. But you are not the exception. We each contain the other. There's a quote by James Baldwin. Each of us forever contains the other. Something like that. I had it in my mind, and I left. Each of us inextricably and forever contains the other. Each of us inextricably and forever contains the other. This has nothing to do with religion. It's the nature of reality. It's nothing to do with being Buddhist, Christian, etc. We contain each other. That's the Dharma. I want to plunge a little bit deeper into this sutra. There's a line. I mean, it's quite an involved sutra. It's about maybe eight or so pages. I'm just taking out a couple of clips here and there. So in one part of the sutra, Dogen exhorts his students to observe mountains walking. Again, you got to think about this is in the 12th century, 13th century. Saying, observe the mountains walking. He says, if you doubt mountains walking, you do not know your own walking. If you doubt mountains walking, you do not know your own walking. It's not that you do not walk, but that you do not understand your own walking. That's really true. We don't, and on a literal level, we don't understand our own walking. we take it for granted. On a literal level, that we can walk, but there's something deeper here than simply walking. What does it mean? What could it mean that the mountains are walking? We can take this in a number of directions, but one thought that comes to my mind is, and this is a practice within the Dharma, is to be the mountain, to imagine ourselves as a mountain. And that's what we do when we sit in Zazen. When we're sitting Zazen, we're stable. And there's a sense of stability to our physical body. This is especially when we're thoughts circling around our brain. We don't know how to calm our minds down. We can connect with the mountain within us. Right? If we are each inextricably and forever containing the other, that is no less true for the mountains within us. Those mountains are also us. And so we can tap in to the mountains within us. We can tap into that energy of the mountain, that sense of stability. We could, if nothing else, learn to slow down. Of course, if you watched a speed-up version of plate tectonics, you would see the mountains almost dancing, depending on how fast you go. Like over 480 million, if you condense 480 million years into, say, 1 minute, we would see the mountains dancing. The Appalachian Mountains, right? They'd be going really quick. So, but us as human beings, we only think in terms of maybe 100 years. If we're lucky, we think in terms of 100 years or 50 years maybe. We don't have that long view unless we practice. That's where practice comes in. We enter into the ultimate, what's called the ultimate image, or the absolute realm. And any one of us here can enter into that realm at any time. You don't have to have some special ability. It's just the way that maybe you hear something, maybe you hear the pebble hitting the bamboo, or something wakes us up. Maybe you experience old age, sickness, and death in some form, and you realize there's something more that I've been missing. And so we can tap into the mountain within ourselves. And that mountain can ground us, can slow down. We live at such a fast and rapid pace, and we don't value slowing down. It's kind of like constant stimulation. I want to get this, I want to get this, I want to get this. Or even with spirituality, we want to get this, we want to get some special experience. But what if we were to just slow it way down? We can slow down. The mountains move, compared to humans, the mountains move very, very slow. But the mountains are also in us. And we can tap into that speed at any moment. So this is just a reminder of that. This is just a reminder when your head is spinning, trying to catch your tail, you can slow down. You can slow down. And we come here together to sit Zazen together so that we can do that more easily. It's just so much easier, isn't it? When you come and sit with a group and you get the collective energy of everybody in the space. That's why I said at the beginning here of Zazen that we never doubt that you're not contributing. Just by coming, just by sitting down, you're contributing. There's an energy that's created. In Chinese theory, we talk about qi, or in India, prana. It's energy. And when we sit in silence, we're generating that qi, that energy. And it's palpable. You can feel it when you're sitting in silence. When the room is really silent, you can feel that silence. maybe one last thing I think that this metaphor of the mountains walking is pointing to is the inevitability of change. Right? We get ourselves surprised, so we get fooled. We get fooled by the mountains walking because we think some things are just never going to change. And usually, in a negative sense, some things are always going to be like this. But I think each of us has had an experience where there's a major upheaval. Right? The mountains are walking. And we can't ever doubt that this will continue to happen for us. The mountains will continue to walk here and there. I'll give you an example from my own life. We've had a family of Hondurans staying with us for the past over 2 years now, seeking asylum. And now there's some big changes taking place. They will, I don't know when, but pretty soon, maybe within the next couple of months, will be going out on their own, by their own space. And so it will be an interesting shift where here we thought they were going to be here. I mean, you get this sense like something is going to be there forever. Where someone is going to be there forever because you see them in the moment. And you think, is this ever going to change? Or you think, I hope this never changes. Or it could go either way. But it does, it changes. It shifts, something shifts. I think, when I was at non-equity Zendo, I thought I was going to be there for the rest of my life. That was my plan. That was the trajectory of my vision. Okay, I'm just here. This is it. It's very simple, very straightforward. And then I realized, nope, not going to happen. Something's changing here. And I got to pay attention to that. My teacher, she probably thought the same thing, but she's going to be there the rest of her life. Now she's in an assisted living facility. You saw the same thing with Melbourne. So these mountains, right? These mountains are moving. They change. So I just want to, first, if we think we're stuck in some way in our job or our marriage or with our kids, things will change inevitably. That's the gift of the mountains walking. It might not happen at the pace that we want it because humans tend to think in terms of 50 or 100 years. But if we think in terms of the mountain, 480 million years, things are going to definitely change. We don't have to worry about change happening. But what our practice is, it's about keeping at whatever it is that we're doing, putting in the effort. Sometimes it involves us struggling. And that's why we come to sit. That's our koan. Things are not changing the way we want them. That's our koan. We sit with that and we put some effort into it. Maybe we're able to let go of our ideas about what things are supposed to be like. But what appears impossible to move or change is possible. I think that's another message here. What appears to be impossible to move or change is certainly possible. So don't be fooled by your small views. The mountains do walk. And I thought maybe it would be interesting to discuss how you've seen mountains walk. Of course, metaphorically speaking. Maybe other examples.
I'd say that, life as long as mine, you see mountains walk many times, actually. And you become accustomed and, ready for the mountains to walk again. I mean, the mountains I've walked here at this Zen center, Zen center a couple times. And of course, in life, that there are changes that happen that it's usually, not your plan, right? You have an idea of, which plan is in life, and it sends you off in a new direction. And usually, which is, turns out great. A lot of times. That's it.
And folks online, please feel free to share as well. Or if there's other questions too, you're welcome. Yeah.
Thanks, Daishin. Well, there's a couple different things I was thinking of. Like, if there's a huge problem in my life or something that doesn't sit right with me, I'll think, okay, I need to change it. But then I reflect on every time that's happened, if I just be patient, the problems usually handle themselves. Like if I don't have to act in like some aggressive way. A lot of times I can just patiently wait and the problem will usually handle itself. And another way I saw it was maybe the mountains really aren't literally moving. Maybe the mountains are just kind of walking their walk without actually like moving. So they're kind of like existing.
Yeah, and it may be for Dogen, the mountains have always existed there since the beginning. And so a walking mountain wasn't being literal there.
So I don't always like when the mountains walk. So I've had to redefine both my relationship with both of my parents. And I want them to be the, stable. You've always protected me. Thought my dad knew everything. And just like he still thinks of me as his little girl, I still think of him as you're supposed to fix everything. Well, that's not fair. Then this is not possible. He doesn't have a magic wand, or if he hasn't used it. My mother, as you all know, has dementia. So I had to reform a relationship with her. So it's hard, but eventually you have to accept that they are walking and that you have to redefine, and they are the people that you knew growing up. They are not the same people, and neither am I.
Yeah, that's a great example. Parents change. Yeah.
Like, who are you?
Well, I guess you could say it's a Buddhist concept, but it's just straight reality. You can look and see it, and that is impermanence is absolutely certain. It's going to go away. It's going to change. I mean, in fact, we're moving 68,000 miles an hour right this second.
Right.
So, things are on shaky ground.
We're on a top spinning. Yeah, that's what keeps us all here, too.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what keeps us glued.
That keeps us glued to the ground. We're spinning so fast that we can't feel it. Yeah.
I also really like what Benji said about thinking of it also in terms of patience and really, seeing things in the long view. Our tendency is just to, short term, what's next. And I was telling the group down at OCC this week, I heard a great thing about impermanence this week. I heard that 99-point-something% of all species that have been alive, which is the beginning of the earth, have gone extinct.
Wow.
So it's like appreciate the present moment. When you're sitting in meditation, think about things in a really long-term way.
Right.
Long view of things.
Right, and we're getting better at thinking about the deep past, in terms of millions and billions of years. We're getting better at that, and think, wow, the Earth has really changed over time. We're not as good as thinking at thinking of the long-term future in terms of, say, 1,000,000 years from now.
It's inconceivable.
Right, it's inconceivable, but certainly things are going to are we there might be this thought that we are the be all and end all of the species, but aren't we on a planet that is constantly changing and evolving, and we're totally subject to that. What that will look like. I mean, we don't have to imagine it, but we could kind of put it out there in the long-term future. What will life on Earth be like? This is a place where life is really fecund. It happens to be exactly the right distance from the sun. And just like the Rockies and the Appalachians, all of the other planets play a role here on Earth too. It's not that Jupiter's way out there. And, the Buddha was enlightened when he saw the morning star, which was probably one of the planets. None of these planets are also part of the Earth. So we live in a place where life really blossoms here. If humans don't survive, something certainly will. We don't know what's going to happen here. We don't have to worry about what's going to happen, the fate of the Earth.
It reminds me that I read a story about they're trying to figure out how to communicate to future humans that there's nuclear waste stored here in this mountain.
Yeah.
They figure future humans may not even be speaking any kind of modern languages.
Right.
So they're trying to use intuitive pictograms or something.
Yeah. Right.
That's a
So
long
nuclear
way.
waste will be there for way longer than civilization will.
Yeah, it's really incredible to think about that.
There's a scientist telling me with a spoon in his mouth. Don't eat this.
I like your Dharma thing, and how it relates to last week's discussion on the koan. And the one that comes to mind right away is the two tigers and stronger, and how this feels like even though mountains are rocking, we need to just set still. And this becomes stronger. This becomes this moment of being able just to with everything happening, nuclear waste, climate change, all of these pressing issues that are these tigers.
These tigers, yeah.
There's this strawberry right here.
There is.
You guys are all my strawberries today.
Wonderful taking that metaphor to the next level. Yeah, the tigers and the snakes down below are like climate change, nuclear waste, etc. But there still is that strawberry present.
Something from some of the reading that we do sometimes, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it's if you don't see it straight, then mountains and rivers will block your way. But if you see it straight, then mountains and rivers won't block your way. So I guess that ties into that. So the mountains will move for you.
Harmony of difference and sameness.
Yeah.
Sounds okay.
To understand the way right before you, how will you know the path you should walk? Progress is not a matter of far or near, but if you are confused, mountains and rivers block your way.
Daishin, hi. Thank you for the talk. I was just thinking about how a lot of patterns that we've kind of set ourselves into as a society are kind of really shifting right now. I was just thinking in particular how we have often this sort of social script of you're born, you go to so many years of school, go to college, and get married, get a house, get a job, have a kid, work for so many years, retire, and then die. And that's what life is supposed to be. And that script is really only a few decades old, and it's only ever been true for a portion of the population. But it's something that's really sunk into a lot of us as, what is expected out of life. And now that, it's harder to afford a home now that people are, going deep into debt for college. There's this sort of needing to reorient. And with all that, plus the interrelated, COVID and climate change and stuff like that, it really often feels like we're in an era where the mountains still have one foot in the air. Like it started to take a step, but it's not quite landed yet. And so it's, I don't know that I have like a clear thought to finish that, but that sort of feeling of suspension as the mountains start to walk, but haven't quite gotten to their destination,
Right. So there's foot is up in the air, these mountains, and the idea that we've been acculturated into basically grow up, get an education, get a job, have a family, buy a house, and retire. This may not be a working model for many of us. Maybe it's slowly not becoming.
I was volunteering. Thank you for the talk, and hello, everybody. Glad to be with you all. I was volunteering at Food at First, which is at the church basement. They have 3 days out of a week, a place for everybody to go get food. It's an open market. And I was in back handing, cleaning up, but handing out vegetables. And there's a whole bunch of us working together. But as you were speaking about the trees and the mountains, I was first looking at them as people who need something, food, all different colors, all different ages. And I could see that my mind was switching back and forth between, well, then when you talked about the mountains, all of a sudden I realized these were all mountains walking. I was judging these mountains, trying to figure out what their stories were. How can I be more of service or not? And all of a sudden it shifted to all these mountains and people are bodhisattvas. And it shifted in me about how I was serving others and how I was seeing just people or mountains itself. And it became a lot easier for me to serve. It was like I wasn't there because I was getting really tired and I was getting kind of like, I wish it was over. And then all of a sudden it just, the shift between, it was almost the whole thing with I and thou. And I was thinking of that, the I and thou, the book from Martin Buber. And I saw them as more of I and thou rather than I and it, rather than it. And it just shifted my perspective. Anyway, I just appreciate the talk about the mountains moving.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing and bringing it into how to connect with service. Yeah.
So everybody's sharing, it's got me, I'm Ryan. I've been thinking about some political science major, guilty of it, but when you talking about the mountains versus the person makes me think of, so Plato talked about trying to find where good and evil are in a person, where is good in a person, and he argued it's digging around inside of an individual to try to find this small thing that you could say is good is difficult, so they looked at a society, a village, a city-state, and said, if we look at scale, it's easier, we can find it in the city, which is a creation of a person, and then that can help us find it in ourselves. So, and in the sutra, to when he says, understanding your own walking, how can you understand your own walking if you can't understand the mountain? To me, can be seen as trying to find nirvana in myself, trying to find that peace in myself is it can be difficult and it's small and personal, but as you said in the beginning, that nature and the inanimate can be a better teacher. Looking at the mountain to learn, to see the lesson, to understand my own walking, or to understand my own nirvana.
Yeah, and I'm not really an expert at this. I was, yesterday, I had a chance to watch a movie called My Octopus
My octopus friend.
Teacher.
Teacher.
Have you guys seen that? Some of you
Yeah.
seen it? Yeah. I mean, I think that guy puts us all to shame.
Yeah.
He really demonstrates, like,
What's it about? I've never heard of it.
It's about this filmmaker who goes, he has kind of a midlife crisis type thing, and then he starts diving on the coast very close to where his house was, and he makes friends with an octopus, basically.
Nice.
And he documents it because he's a filmmaker. He documents it for like a whole year. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but I saw a big
It's
chunk of it.
amazing. I think it might be on Netflix.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. I'll have to finish it later, but it was just astounding. The sentient, the non-sentient beings preach the Dharma, and even beings like an octopus preach the Dharma if we can hear it. And I like to think that our practice of sitting helped us to get more fine-tuned, our mind fine-tuned. Especially after you sit a sesshin for like 3 days, your mind gets more sensitized to the Dharma. Your antenna is more directed to hearing the Dharma from the non-sentient as well as the sentient.
Thank you for the talk. Does the, I don't know, sutra or just Buddhism in general talk about how to handle the mourning of these changes?
Oh, right,
Or,
yeah.
The grief of
Right.
unexpected changes.
Right, yeah, of course. Yeah, the grief. I mean, there's not one right way. I mean, of course, it is dependent on the situation, how to grieve. But grief is an important piece of letting go and of healing for all of us. And if we don't grieve at loss, then it still stays with us. It kind of stays buried. So we need to learn how to grieve. There's a story of a woman who lost her daughter in the time of the Buddha. Have you heard that story? She lost her daughter, her young daughter, and she wanted to know what she could do to bring her daughter back to life. And the townspeople suggested she talk to the Buddha, and maybe he can help you out. And so she went to the Buddha and asked him, "Can you bring my daughter back to life?" And he said, "Yes, if you could go to one household and bring me a mustard seed from which the household has not experienced death." And so she gathered up her things quickly and went from house to house looking for mustard seeds. And of course, every house had a mustard seed, but none of them had never experienced death and loss. And so she had an awakening experience doing that. So there's something, I think part of grief is being able to see that we're not alone in it. It's not just affecting us personally. I mean, we might feel it personally, but everyone experiences it. So we're not isolated in it. Whereas I think in our culture, it's easy to get feelings of isolation and grief. So that might be one way to do it.